"She's under my protection now," Bryce said, loud enough for the entire auditorium to hear. His arm was still draped casually over Laura's chair. Laura, my wife of 22 years, who didn't even flinch. She smirked. The kind of smirk that says, "This is normal." The kind that says, "He can't do anything about it anyway." Half the team laughed. The other half looked around nervously, unsure whether they were supposed to laugh or pretend they didn't hear what they just heard. It was the kind of moment corporate HR pretends doesn't happen because it's just uncomfortable enough to ignore. I was sitting in the back row, like I always do at these all-hands meetings. Right between the broken coffee urn and the flickering projector outlet no one's ever gotten around to replacing. 30 years at this company, and I've become part of the wallpaper. I don't wear a title that makes people nervous. No one stops their conversation when I walk into a room. I'm Richard from Facilities, the guy who knows where the backup routers are stored and which floor tiles creak when executives walk in late. But not today. Today, I leaned forward just slightly in my seat, looked Bryce in the eye, and said, quietly, calmly, with that same blank expression I give to vendors who think shouting gets the wiring done faster, "Refresh the company announcements." He blinked, almost amused, then pulled out his phone with the kind of exaggerated casualness of a man who believes he's untouchable. Laura turned to look at me like I'd just embarrassed her. Bryce tapped the company portal and scrolled. Then his mouth opened, but no sound came out. That's when the CEO himself, yes, him, crossed the room like a man walking toward a landmine he's already chosen to detonate. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise an eyebrow. Just reached out, took Bryce's badge off his lanyard, leaned in, and whispered something that, judging by Bryce's expression, hit harder than any slap. "Do you have any idea who you were talking to?" Silence. Not just from Bryce. From the whole room. People shifting in their seats, others glancing back at me as if they'd just realized they'd been sitting next to the bomb the entire time. The thing about being underestimated for decades is you learn how to operate without being watched. You get good at making moves that look like maintenance schedules and calendar invites. And when people stop looking at you, they stop wondering what you know, and more importantly, who you talk to. Like the board. Like compliance. Like the CEO, who still owes me for a quiet favor I did in 2008 when someone tried to embezzle a 7-figure consulting payout and pin it on his nephew. Now I wasn't just Richard from Facilities. I was something else. New company-wide memo, top of the portal. Freshly pushed. Staff realignment. Richard Danner appointed Director of Compliance Strategy. Reports directly to CEO. That wasn't a promotion. It was a statement. It was the equivalent of showing up to a chess match holding your opponent's king already in your hand. I watched Bryce's face go from smug to white, from white to something that looked a lot like nausea. And Laura? She tried to smile through it. Tried to act like it was all some weird coincidence. Like she didn't know. She did know. She just didn't think I'd ever do anything. Because that's who I was to her, too. Richard who picks up the dry cleaning. Richard who adjusts the thermostat. Richard who doesn't ask why she keeps going to quarterly trainings at hotels that don't host any trainings. She was so confident in my silence. She let another man stake a claim on her. In public, no less. And here's where I'll make a little personal ask. If you've made it this far, and you're not subscribed yet, do me a favor and hit that button. More than 90% of folks never subscribe. And yeah, we notice. It means a lot to the team working behind the scenes on these stories. Keeps the fire lit. Thanks. Anyway, back to Bryce, who suddenly looked like he wanted to be anywhere else but standing next to my wife. He didn't say another word. Just stared at his phone like it might somehow start lying to him. As if the announcement might vanish if he blinked hard enough. As if the CEO might forget the whisper he just delivered. But this wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a joke. It was the beginning. And Bryce, poor, dumb, arrogant Bryce, had no idea how deep the roots of this went, or how long I'd been watering them. Laura laughed. Not just a polite, awkward chuckle, the kind of laugh you let out when you want people to know you're comfortable. Like the two of them were in on some inside joke. She even leaned into Bryce's arm a little, as if my presence in the room was a mosquito buzz in the background. Her husband of 2 decades? The guy who sat through her mother's endless stories, who repaired the front porch she said she hated, who paid for her grad school when she wanted to feel intellectually alive again. Yeah, that guy apparently didn't warrant a glance. Not even now. Bryce shrugged as if my words were static. Still riding high off the performance, he pulled out his phone with a dramatic flair, swiped up, and tapped the company portal. I saw it happen in real time, the shift. That reflexive smirk, the arrogance embedded deep in his bones, evaporated in exactly 3.7 seconds. His face didn't just fall, it deflated. Eyes narrowed. Lips slightly parted like he was trying to breathe through a straw. His thumb hovered over the screen like it was hovering over a live grenade. Staff realignment. Richard Danner appointed Director of Compliance Strategy. Reports directly to CEO. The silence that followed didn't feel awkward. It felt surgical. You could practically hear the mental math being done across the room. Chairs squeaked as people subtly leaned forward. The clinks of coffee mugs being set down. And Bryce, poor, confused, desperately recalculating Bryce, still staring at the screen like it might morph into a joke. Then came the footsteps. Measured. Intentional. Not rushed, not hesitant. The kind of footsteps people make when they've already decided exactly what's going to happen and how long it will take. The CEO walked directly across the conference floor, not toward the podium, not toward the snack table, straight toward Bryce. No detours, not even a glance at anyone else. He stopped less than a foot from him. Then, without asking, without ceremony, he reached out and took Bryce's badge right off his lanyard. Silence again, but it was the whisper that followed that changed everything. Do you have any idea who you were talking to? No one laughed this time. Even the HR reps who'd been pretending to answer Slack messages earlier were now fully upright, alert. I saw one of them close her laptop like it suddenly weighed too much. One junior manager whispered something to his neighbor and got elbowed for it. Another started looking around like she'd just realized she bet on the wrong horse. I didn't move. I didn't need to, because everything had already been set in motion weeks ago. No, months. The files, the footage, the little trails that arrogant people leave behind when they think they're above rules or scrutiny, those were all accounted for. This moment, this wasn't revenge. It was rollout. Laura finally turned to me then. It was subtle, just a glance, like she needed confirmation that what was happening was really happening. That the man who changed light bulbs and handled annual fire drill briefings just got his title updated to Director of Compliance Strategy. That same man who'd asked her, just a month ago, whether she ever thought about boundaries at work. To which she'd replied, deadpan, "Don't start acting jealous now. It's just office energy." Right. Office energy. Bryce stood frozen, his phone still in his hand, now completely irrelevant. Laura shifted her weight, looked down at her own device, and saw it too. Her face tightened, not panic yet, but something creeping toward it. Because this wasn't a funny HR warning. This wasn't some email slap on the wrist about jokes made in poor taste. This was structural, institutional, board-approved. The guy they joked about in break rooms, the janitor with keys to everything, now had keys they didn't even know existed. I saw one of the VPs in logistics lean over and whisper to his assistant, "Since when is he with the CEO's office?" Answer, "Since the day he saw too much and said too little." And the more everyone realized they'd never really paid attention to me, the quieter the room got. Because now, every hallway whisper, every expensed lunch Bryce couldn't explain, every training weekend that wasn't logged quite right, suddenly had a name attached to the person reviewing it. Mine. And I wasn't looking for apologies. I was just getting started. It started with the laugh. You know the kind. Too light, too sweet, too practiced. A sound I hadn't heard from her in years. Not at home, not with me. It wasn't the laugh of a wife watching a good sitcom or catching up with an old friend. No, this one had layers. Flirty layers. Dangerous ones. I was in the kitchen at 10:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, making tea. She was in the living room, finishing up a project, her laptop open, the glow lighting up her cheekbones just right. She looked 28 again. And I, apparently, looked like wallpaper. She was on speaker. Didn't even bother to switch to headphones anymore. That's how safe she felt. "Bryce, you're my daily oxygen," she giggled. Oxygen. I stood there, holding the kettle, steam rising up, and just stared at the back of her head. Not shocked. Not even angry. Just still. Like a man who spotted a leak and knows that yelling at the water won't fix the pipe. That night, I started a folder on my private drive. Named it Q2 Logistics so it wouldn't raise eyebrows. And then, I started collecting. It wasn't rage. It wasn't jealousy. It was tactical. First came the emails. Screenshots, downloads, archived threads. Messages timestamped well outside of work hours, filled with emojis HR would have field days over. He called her MVP. She called him her rock. Once, she even signed off with, "Don't know what I'd do without you." No period. Just 3 dots. Then came the receipts. Expense reports showing dinners at places we'd never go. 2 drinks. 1 dessert. Always 2 entrees. Billed as vendor networking, though she hadn't worked with a vendor since before the pandemic. Then I cross-referenced Bryce's submissions. Same dates. Matching times. Identical mileage reimbursement. After that, I reviewed the conference calendar. That's when things went from suspicious to surgical. 3 months earlier, Laura had attended a compliance symposium at a hotel downtown. No symposium ever happened there. I checked, called the venue, and pretended to be looking to register. They told me the ballroom was closed that weekend due to maintenance. But the minibar wasn't. And the parking garage logged 2 license plates staying overnight. Hers and his. I didn't tell her I knew. Not yet. Instead, I reconnected with an old friend, Evan. CEO. Once a golf buddy from back in the days when I still played on weekends. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. But when I texted, need to speak. Quietly. Think there's a compliance risk brewing. He called me before I'd even finished my coffee. We met off-site. A quiet steakhouse with soundproof booths. I laid out a few of the early patterns. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he nodded and said, "How public do you want this to go?" "I don't," I said. "Not yet. I want to be surgical. I want this clean, controlled, documented." Evan sipped his bourbon, stared at me for a long second, then smiled without humor. "I knew there was a reason I liked playing against you. You always made your move 2 holes before I saw it coming." From that moment forward, I wasn't just documenting. I was preparing, laying groundwork, watching patterns, noticing who else was laughing too long at Bryce's jokes, who started avoiding eye contact when Laura walked into a meeting. Every detail mattered. I began reviewing the compliance pipeline, subtly, of course. Looked for weak spots in departmental spending, quiet irregularities in mentorship sign-offs. Bryce had made himself a little empire inside the walls of HR and strategic ops, and no one questioned him. Not because he was good, he wasn't, but because he was likable, because he told jokes, remembered birthdays, smiled big. Laura had always fallen for that kind of performance. Big teeth, small spine. Meanwhile, I moved on the back end. I updated my internal credentials under the pretense of prepping for our semi-annual facility audit. Nobody blinked. I had admin clearance already. I just routed access for compliance review under a generic placeholder tag. Legal wouldn't notice. Not yet. And finally, I told Evan, "If it gets messy, you step out. Let me absorb the fire." He just said, "Richard, you're the last guy I'd bet against." Funny thing about trust, it only feels risky when it's new. I'd been loyal to this company longer than Bryce had been out of college. They forgot that. But Evan didn't. So while Laura laughed in our living room and Bryce cracked jokes in team sinks, I watched, waited, built. Because some men punch walls, and others lay foundations. She didn't knock. She slammed the door hard enough that the glass pane rattled, then stormed in like she still lived in some reality where I had to explain myself to her. "You ambushed him," Laura snapped, hands on her hips like a principal scolding a student. "You embarrassed me. In front of everyone." I didn't look up right away. Finished typing the last few lines of a compliance escalation draft, hit save, and closed the file. When I finally met her eyes, she was already fuming. Red cheeks, clenched jaw, the full catalog of performative outrage. The same face she made when a server brought her the wrong wine, or when the dry cleaner folded her blouses the wrong way. I kept my voice flat, calm. I protected the company. That's my job now. "Don't twist this into some noble cause," she hissed. "You could have come to me privately. You could have." I opened the top drawer of my desk, pulled out a slim folder, and slid it across to her without saying another word. Glossy black cover. No title. Just thick enough to be undeniable. She blinked. One hand hovered over it like she was afraid to touch it. Then she opened it. First page. A printout of a calendar entry labeled Q2 Vendor Sync. Confidential. Her name. Bryce's name. Timestamp 9:15 p.m. on a Saturday. Location. Hotel conference room that never existed. Second page. Room service receipt. 1 room. 2 guests. Signature. Hers. Third page. A screenshot of an internal Slack conversation, saved before she could delete it. Her. "You spoil me, MVP." Him. "Only for my oxygen." She flipped faster then. Timestamps. Emails. Side-by-side expense report discrepancies. Parking validation records that didn't match the official travel logs. All data. All neat. All undeniable. By page 9, she wasn't flipping anymore. She was staring. You've been collecting this?" Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. No anger now. Just realization. I nodded. "I wanted to be sure it wasn't just emotional," I said. For a second, I thought she'd throw the folder at me. Her hand twitched. But instead, she just stood there, gripping the edge of the desk like the floor had started to tilt. Is this revenge? She asked, quieter now. Almost a whisper. Because we. Don't finish that sentence. I cut in, still calm. You don't want to lie. Not now. She looked like she was trying to summon a version of herself that didn't exist anymore. The composed professional. The respected strategist. But all that showed now was someone who'd gambled and lost, and couldn't quite understand when the dealer pulled the chips off the table. You humiliated me. No, I said, leaning back in my chair. You did that when you let a man drape his arm over you in front of your husband and half the company. You just didn't think it would matter. Her lip quivered for a moment. She tried again, softer this time. Bryce is a friend. I raised an eyebrow. You call me that, too. Doesn't make it true. That one landed. She winced. I didn't move. I let the silence settle like dust. Let her feel every second of it. Let her think, something she clearly hadn't done in months. This is personal, Richard. You can't pretend it's just about the company. It's not just about the company, I said. It's also about my name being on the same mortgage as someone who thinks discretion is optional. She swallowed hard. Her hand hovered over the folder again, like she might scoop it all back inside, pretend it hadn't happened. But the documents didn't go away. They didn't forgive. They didn't have selective memory. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I smiled just a little. That's the thing about boundaries, Laura. You don't realize they're gone until you're already standing on the wrong side. The door stayed open when she left. No dramatic slamming this time. Just the sound of her heels clicking down the hall a little too fast. A little too unsteady. I watched her go, then turned back to my screen. Reopened the draft. Adjusted the subject line. Compliance escalation packet. Internal conduct risk. Her name was already in the metadata. She just hadn't seen it coming. Yet. The email from HR was polite, almost chipper. Hey Laura, when you have a moment, can you swing by for a quick sync? Just want to clarify a few things around recent departmental expenditures. Shouldn't take more than 20. She didn't even flinch when she read it. Assumed it was routine. In fact, she walked past my office on the way there, paused long enough to toss a half-hearted glare in my direction, and muttered, cleaning up your mess. I didn't respond. I just looked at her the way you look at someone who still thinks they're holding a gun, not realizing the chamber's empty. She walked into the HR meeting room with her usual confidence. Button blazer, shoulders back, that calculated half-smile she always used when dealing with people she believed were beneath her. 3 people were already seated. Marcia from HR Compliance, Joseph from Internal Finance, and Helena from Legal. All smiling. All courteous. But the tone changed the moment the door clicked shut. Thanks for coming, Laura, Marcia began. We just have a few questions about your collaboration with Bryce. Nothing major, just cross-referencing departmental budgets and travel records. Laura relaxed slightly, playing along. Sure, of course. I assumed this was about yesterday's awkwardness. Helena didn't look up. What awkwardness? The smile on Laura's face faltered, just for a second. She adjusted her watch like it itched. Never mind, I just meant it's fine. Joseph tapped a folder in front of him and slid a printed sheet forward. This is the expense report from your Q2 strategy offsite. The one listed under Joint Vendor Scouting. The one submitted for reimbursement twice, once by you and once by Bryce. Can you confirm whether you both attended that event? Laura blinked. That was, yes, we went together. It was an exploratory thing. We were evaluating partnership opportunities. Helena cut in without looking up. We contacted the venue. There was no vendor event that weekend. In fact, the location was booked for a private wedding party. The room tilted slightly for Laura. Her fingers twitched toward the paper like she might flip it, erase it, correct it. I mean, we were also doing strategic planning. It wasn't formal. Marcia leaned forward, voice still sweet. Can you define what that entailed? Strategic planning in a hotel room booked under his name. Laura's mouth opened, then closed. This wasn't damage control. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was a recorded interview. Meanwhile, on the other side of the building, Bryce had just discovered he couldn't log into his account. Email, denied. Slack, denied. Access badge, blinking red. He stood in front of the IT desk like a man whose car had been stolen mid-commute. He texted Laura, WTF. Can't log into anything. Did something happen? She didn't see it immediately. She was too busy wiping her palms on her skirt under the table, trying not to let her voice shake. Are you suggesting misconduct? She asked Helena, deflecting. We're asking questions, Helena replied. You can either answer them here or during a formal audit process. Your choice. That's when Laura pulled out her phone beneath the table and sent Bryce a quick message. What's going on? I'm in HR. They're grilling me. No response. She waited 30 seconds. Typed again. Please tell me you're not suspended. Still nothing. Back in my office, I watched it unfold through the internal dashboard I'd quietly built over the last 3 weeks. Not spyware, nothing illegal. Just meticulous access logs, communication patterns, account activities. Every login Bryce failed to make was timestamped. Every system that pinged back a red flag was one I'd prepped in advance. I'd anticipated their arrogance. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly the walls would start to close in once I pushed the first domino. Bryce had always been cocky, but never smart. He assumed charm could cover logistics. But compliance doesn't answer to charisma. It answers to patterns, to trails. And Bryce's were all over the system. Laura checked her phone again. Still no reply. Her breath started to shorten. Her neck flushed red. It wasn't just embarrassment now. It was fear. Isolation. She'd stepped out onto a plank thinking she'd do a little dance and step right back. But the ship had already moved. She tried to smile again, to lighten the room. Look, I'm happy to provide more context later. It's all just misunderstandings. Marcia smiled back. Great. We'll be scheduling a deeper review with external audit. In the meantime, your status will be temporarily reassigned to remote until we finish our preliminary findings. That word, remote, landed like a knife. They were pulling her out of the meetings, out of the office, out of proximity to Bryce, out of the story. I closed my laptop, folded my hands, and waited. The second domino was already wobbling. The conference room they chose wasn't one of the usual ones. No glass walls, no catered croissants, no fake bonsai tree in the corner. This one was sealed, soundproofed. No windows, just thick walls and thicker reputations. The CEO sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 board members, 1 external auditor, and Helena from legal. No assistants, no observers, no digital invites, everything by hand. On paper, phones left outside. That's how you knew it was serious. I brought a single binder. Not a slideshow, not a thumb drive. A binder. They respected that. I laid it down in the center of the table and flipped it open. This, I began, is a breakdown of misappropriated funds across 4 quarters, all tied directly to cross-departmental interactions between strategic operations and human resources. Helena already looked familiar with the first few pages. She'd helped me thread the needle, after all. But the others? They were just beginning to understand the depth. I spoke evenly. No dramatics. No finger-pointing. Just facts. 12 expense reports flagged for duplication. 8 travel logs with falsified vendor justifications. 4 signed mentorship waivers pushed through without compliant signatures. And 1 unauthorized account used to mask personal reimbursements as departmental learning credits. I turned the page. These are screenshots of Slack and internal emails corroborating the coordination between the involved parties. Laura's name was there. So was Bryce's, along with 2 others who had quietly benefited from the chaos he built. 1 in procurement, 1 in training. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I let the weight of the documents do the work. The dates, the timestamps, the structure. Because fraud isn't about 1 smoking gun. It's about architecture. They'd built a little castle of lies, and I brought the blueprints. When I finished, I slid a copy of a report labeled Investor Vulnerability Matrix, Internal Ethics Risk Factors to the CEO. This was your biggest liability. Not because of scale, but because of visibility. 1 leaked to the press about personal relationships influencing budget decisions. And this company doesn't lose money. It loses credibility. And once trust is gone, there's no buyback program for that. One of the board members, a man named Sullivan, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Why didn't you bring this to us sooner, Richard? I looked him straight in the eye. Because I wasn't officially responsible for protecting us. Until now. Silence. And then, slowly, Sullivan nodded. The CEO folded his hands. How far does this reach? Internal involvement appears limited to under 10 staff. Most unaware. But the central pattern? Bryce was the architect. Laura knew. Maybe not the scale, but she enabled it. Helena added, we've already locked down the email systems and suspended any active transactions tied to the flagged accounts. They're clean. No breach. No exposure. But this needed to happen now, before year-end reports go live. I flipped to the final page. There's one more thing, I said. Bryce used a mentorship grant account to pay for a vendor contract that doesn't exist. That money, over $12,000, was rerouted through a consulting firm that's been inactive since 2019. That caught Sullivan's attention. Shell company? I nodded. Registered in Delaware. Guess who the listed admin is? No one answered. They didn't have to. Laura Danner. The room shifted. No gasps. Just quiet, focused anger. The CEO took off his glasses and rubbed his temple. Christ. No one said a word for nearly a minute. The kind of silence that feels like a fuse slowly hissing toward something explosive. Finally, the other board member, a woman named Ingrid, spoke. So what now? The CEO didn't even look at her. He looked at me. You're in charge of this resolution. Board gives full authority. No press. No leaks. No settlements until you sign off. I nodded once. Nothing dramatic. Just business. Understood, I said. I closed the binder and stood. The room didn't applaud. But they didn't stop me either. Respect wasn't given. It was tallied, quietly, precisely, in moments like this. And now they understood what I was. Not a janitor. Not a ghost. A wall. The one they didn't see until someone crashed into it. The garage door groaned open the way it always did, like it resented being disturbed. Laura pulled in and shut off the ignition, sitting in the quiet cabin of her car for a full minute, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. Her reflection stared back at her in the rearview mirror, makeup half melted from the tension of the day, hair clipped a little too tightly. She was supposed to be in control. She was always in control. Except now, everything felt fogged. No text from Bryce. No calls returned. Her laptop had been remotely wiped. Her access to the internal drive restricted. The remote reassignment email had arrived an hour ago, cold and clinical. And worse, it hadn't even been sent by HR. It had come from me. She entered the house with a stiff kind of precision, the way people do when they're trying not to look like they're being watched, even when they're alone. She dropped her purse on the hallway bench, kicked off her heels with too much force, and headed straight to the bedroom. Then stopped. The room felt wrong. Lighter. She scanned the space. Something missing. No shirts on the hooks. No watch on the dresser. The nightstand on my side was empty, drawer open like a drawer never left. And then she saw it. Her side of the bed. A single manila folder placed precisely on the duvet, angled just so. No clutter. No confusion. Just the words in thick marker, joint assets. She didn't move at first. Just stared at it like it might start speaking. Then, slowly, she sat and opened the flap. Inside, she found copies of the estate trust papers, the trust that protected our house, our savings, our retirement vehicles, our equity holdings. It had taken years to structure. Years of legal meetings and adjustments to ensure that, if anything ever happened to one of us, the other would be protected. But now, her name was gone. Amended. Cleanly. Legally. Irrevocably. Pending final audit. There was a post-it note on top of the last page, in my handwriting. Simple. Precise. Not angry. Until the audit is complete, please contact my counsel. Her hands started to shake. She pulled out her phone, opened our shared banking app. Face ID didn't work. She tried the manual login. It loaded, briefly, then returned a message. User access revoked. Contact primary account administrator. Me. She opened the drawer on her side. Passport, gone. Desk drawer, her backup credit card. Declined earlier that day. She remembered. She thought it was a glitch. Now she knew. This wasn't a glitch. This was containment. She sat there, still in her work clothes, hands in her lap, suddenly unsure whether she lived in this house anymore or was just squatting in someone else's aftermath. She stood, opened the closet, my side cleared. Every hanger empty. Suit bags gone. Even the little ceramic tray I kept my cufflinks in had vanished. But I hadn't taken everything. On the bathroom counter sat a single framed photo. The two of us, maybe 15 years ago, standing in front of a lake somewhere in Vermont. She was laughing. I was squinting against the sun, one hand on her shoulder. She picked it up. On the back, I'd taped a printout. The image metadata from her phone, proving the date, was altered. She told me it was from our anniversary weekend. It wasn't. It was from a conference she'd taken without me. The final straw. She walked back into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, folder still in her lap. The silence wasn't peaceful. It pressed into her chest. Not with guilt, but fear. Real fear. Because for the first time, she realized she didn't know who I was anymore. Or worse, that maybe she never did. And now, there was no conversation to have. No apology ready. No text from Bryce. No plan. Just the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. And the dull, echoing sound of her own breathing in a house that was no longer hers. Bryce always walked into the office like he was a sitcom lead entering stage left. Wide grin, finger guns, cracking jokes in 3 directions before he even hit his desk. That day, no entrance. No grin. No trace. Instead, a campus-wide security ping went out at 7:42 a.m. Employee ID number 543102, temporarily deactivated. Do not override access protocols. By 8:05, Bryce's desk had been emptied. Not packed, emptied. A facilities cart rolled by with his monitor, his chair, and a stack of novelty mugs he'd always insisted made him approachable. The nameplate on his cubicle had been peeled off. His intern, Camille, stood by the printer looking like someone had stolen her dog. Laura, meanwhile, woke up to an email with a subject line so dry it felt surgical. Temporary adjustment to work arrangement. The body was even colder. Effective immediately, you are reassigned to remote-only duties pending further review of internal compliance matters. You are not authorized to contact team members during this period. She read it 3 times. She wasn't fired. Not yet. Just surgically isolated. No contact. No Slack. No video calls. Just silence. Even her calendar was stripped. Meetings vanished like smoke. Shared docs gone. Files frozen. Her name, once proudly attached to half the projects in strategic ops, had been replaced with TBD. She messaged Bryce. No reply. She called. Straight to voicemail. By noon, the whispers began. Marketing murmured first. Dan from paid media leaned over to whisper to Priya about something weird with Laura. By 1 p.m., it had spread to tech. By 2 o'clock, someone in customer analytics had pulled up Bryce's LinkedIn and whispered, "Wasn't he just speaking at that panel last week?" The chat threads exploded. Is Bryce really gone? Did Laura get demoted? I thought they were just work besties. Check the org chart. Her name's gone. Then came the ripple effect. HR summoned 2 more employees from Bryce's so-called mentor circle, Shannon from procurement and Elise from L&D. Both women had spoken highly of him in town halls, posted selfies from team offsites, and approved more than a few suspicious expenditures with his name on the memo line. Now they were being questioned. Hard. Not grilled. Just quietly picked apart. Patterns. Logs. Matching Uber rides. Flights booked on the same card. One of them had even submitted a spa treatment under corporate wellness trial. Bryce had approved it himself. By late afternoon, someone from legal quietly recommended pausing all cross-functional mentorship programs, pending a full framework review. That's when people really started sweating. It wasn't about me anymore. Not Richard. Not the quiet guy from facilities turned director of compliance. It was about the ecosystem Bryce had built, a cozy little empire of favors and flirtations, wrapped in professional jargon and just enough HR language to stay undetected. Until it wasn't. Now it was a virus. One that infected department budgets, mentorship programs, vendor relationships, and cross-departmental travel. The CFO scheduled a closed-door meeting with internal audit. The CMO canceled a planned offsite, citing budget review. Even the diversity committee paused its mentorship showcase, because guess who'd been featured in last quarter's spotlight video, smiling beside a group of hand-picked rising stars? Bryce. Suddenly, nobody wanted their names on anything he touched. LinkedIn endorsements were scrubbed. Photos deleted. One employee even changed her About Me bio from proud to have been mentored by Bryce to passionate about learning and growth. Damage control, full throttle. And Laura? She sat alone at her laptop in the kitchen, logging in with limited credentials, clicking through ghosted dashboards, trying to pretend she still had a job. But even the VPN access lagged now. Her world was shrinking by the hour. She refreshed her inbox. Nothing. Checked Slack. No channels. Opened her calendar. Blank. For years, she thought she was riding the wave of internal influence, that her proximity to Bryce made her untouchable. But influence, when built on innuendo and IOUs, has a shelf life. And the expiration date just hit. Now the question wasn't just who knew. It was who allowed it. And the walls were closing in. The boardroom didn't feel like a conference space anymore. It felt like a courtroom. The air was heavier, as if even the ventilation system understood what was about to go down. They dimmed the lights slightly. Intentional, I'm sure. Subtle psychological pressure. Strip away comfort. Invite clarity. At the long glass table, I sat to the right of the CEO. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His presence was enough. Calm. Absolute. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. Across from me, Bryce slouched in his seat, still trying to play it cool, the ghost of that signature smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth. But it was all reflex now, no conviction behind it. Laura sat next to him, back rigid, eyes glazed over, somewhere between disbelief and dread. Her makeup was perfect. Her expression wasn't. Helena from legal stood at the head of the table. No fanfare. No introductions. Just business. We are convened to close findings related to internal misconduct and subsequent compliance risk. This will be recorded for executive records only. She opened the folder with a slow flip. Each page turned deliberate. First, documented breach of ethics policy. Sections 3.1, 3.4, and 5.2, relating to inappropriate professional relationships between leadership tier staff and subordinates. Laura didn't react. Bryce rubbed his jaw like it might disappear if he pressed hard enough. Second, financial misappropriation, falsified reimbursements, duplicate claims, and misused mentorship funds totaling just over $31,000, all with corroborated internal approvals. Bryce's head dropped slightly. Third, violation of data access protocols, including unauthorized file sharing between employees without compliance documentation. Helena paused then. She looked directly at Bryce. You routed company files through a dormant shell firm under Laura Danner's name. We found 3 payment logs to that account from internal budgets that list no deliverables and no proof of service. Laura blinked. Once. Slowly. Fourth, Helena continued. Exposure risk. Had these activities continued undetected, this firm would have faced potential class action liability for hostile workplace claims, investor negligence, and federal noncompliance. She closed the folder with finality. Mr. Danner's actions protected this company from that outcome. He collected evidence, submitted it properly, and presented it in a way that allowed us to act before external damage occurred. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was precise, like a held breath before a verdict. The CEO turned his head toward me. You have board authority to execute resolution. Final say. I didn't shift in my seat. Didn't adjust my tie. Didn't blink. I already have, I said. That was it. Laura's head jerked slightly. What does that mean? It was Helena who answered. Bryce Thomas, effective immediately, your employment is terminated with cause. You forfeit all severance, stock options, and internal references. Your access remains suspended indefinitely. Legal reserves the right to pursue criminal charges depending on audit findings. Bryce opened his mouth, but nothing came out. No defense. No spin. Just a breath that died before it reached the air. Helena turned to Laura. Laura Danner, you've been offered a voluntary separation agreement. It includes a non-disclosure clause, partial severance, and a 1-year industry non-compete. If you decline, we proceed with formal review, which, based on current evidence, includes accessory charges tied to financial concealment and false reporting. Laura stared at her, then at me. Her voice barely audible. You did this? I tilted my head. I uncovered what you tried to hide. There's a difference. You're destroying everything. No, I said, you did. I'm just removing the rubble. The CEO stood. Everyone followed. Bryce didn't. He just sat there, still trying to figure out when the game changed and why no one told him. Laura rose slowly, like she'd just aged 20 years. Her eyes scanned the room for a lifeline that no longer existed. She looked at me one last time. But I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the resolution, and the room knew it. The news broke internally before Bryce had even made it out of the building. One by one, his access badges were deactivated. He tried to badge into the executive elevator, red light. Security was already waiting downstairs with a box containing the contents of his office, though truth be told, there wasn't much to pack. Bryce didn't keep files. Bryce didn't keep anything. He floated on charm and calendar invites. Now, no smile, no bounce in his step, just silence, dead phone battery, and the slow march down the corridor of the floor he used to run like a personal stage. He passed by the HR glass wall, where people inside pretended not to look, but everyone was watching. Everyone always watches when a fall is this sudden, this complete. Laura walked out a few hours later, paperwork in hand. Her gait robotic, her face unreadable. The board had offered her an out. Resign quietly, accept the NDA and the 1-year non-compete, or face formal charges of data concealment and accessory-level misuse of internal systems. She signed. Of course she signed. There was never going to be a courtroom. No headlines. The damage had to be sealed, not aired. That's how this company protected itself. She left with nothing but a silence that clung to her like smoke. At home, I was already finishing what I'd started. The suitcase lay open on the bed, 1 drawer of shirts, 2 folded suits, basic essentials. I wasn't taking much. I didn't need to. The house, the trust, the accounts, they weren't hers anymore. Her name had been stripped from everything with surgical precision. All legal, all irreversible. She stood in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself like a child in a thunderstorm, watching me pack as though she had something to say, but but didn't know the language for it anymore. Finally, she spoke. I didn't know who you really were. I zipped the suitcase slowly, turned to face her for the last time, and said, that was the point. No yelling. No dramatic pause. Just fact. Then I picked up the suitcase and walked past her. She didn't follow. Didn't ask me to stop. Just stood there, ghost-like, in the house we built together, brick by brick, lie by lie. At the front door, I reached for the final envelope I'd left on the console. A copy of the final asset transfer. Everything she once touched, now rerouted. She had no keys, no codes, no access. Behind me, the house stayed quiet. No apology. No goodbye. Just the soft echo of my shoes on hardwood, the creak of the door as it opened, and the subtle click as it shut behind me. And that was it. No ceremony. No applause. Just the closing of a door and the implosion of a reputation built on convenience and deceit. Bryce was gone. Laura was finished. And me? I never looked back.